Music's greatest songs. Greatest songs. Worth covering. Original classic hitmakers.
And so, to this song from 1963, it's the song that I'm concentrating on, although I will dabble and tell you some of the stories behind the band, the Crystals, because it's just really good. Some of the stories about these old bands, it turns into a, you know, when you're listening to a really good piece of gossip and you're there going, no, really? It's a bit like that, and that's what I'm getting from this wonderful story. I actually got this song again from something I was watching on Netflix, and I went, oh, that's an old classic, let me investigate that. And here we are. The song is And Then He Kissed Me. It was written by Phil Spector, very, very famous. Also had a hand in it, Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry, but Phil Spector was the guy, and it was produced by Spector as well. Initially released as a single in the July of 1963 by the Crystals, and the lyrics, they sort of tell a story. It's a young woman's encounter, then she has a romance, and then the engagement to this gorgeous young man. So it's a very romantic song. It's lovely. In 2004, this song, 2004, all those years later, this song, number 493 on the Rolling Stone magazine's list of greatest songs of all time. It's interesting, isn't it? And also, it was named in the 100 greatest girl group songs of all time by the Billboard Hot 100. So it has its position in the Hall of Fame. But let me tell you about the Crystals, and let me tell you about the single. It's one of the Crystals' best remembered songs, and it was recorded in Los Angeles, 1963. And the lead vocals were sung by a woman, I love the names, Dolores Lala Brooks, that's what they called her. The Wall of Sound arrangement was by a guy called Jack, and it featured the Wrecking Crew and Larry Levine, all these big old names. He was the engineer. And it peaked at number 6 in America, and then number 2 in the UK. And in their terms, it was like their third top 10. I mean, they were doing well. Really interesting, though, with regards to the song. In 1965, the Beach Boys did a retitled version of it. So you might actually, or maybe your parents have played you that one, which is called Then I Kissed Her. And that one's from the point of view of the boyfriend, not the girl. And 2 years after appearing on that album, the song was then released as a single in the UK. Okay, so it was just an album track by the Beach Boys. And it was the record company that released it as a stopgap because they thought that the Beach Boys were taking too long on their Heroes and Villains single. And the Beach Boys were really mad that it had been released. They didn't okay it. They came out to the press and said, we didn't want that. We were just taking our time because we want the best possible album for our listeners. And they really, really didn't appreciate any of that. So that was the conflict there. But let's quickly tell you about the Crystals. They're American, based in New York City. They're one of the defining acts of girl group era, and that's what they say about them. This is 1960s, and between 1960 and 1964, it was all building. They did songs like Uptown and You'll Know, He's a Rebel is a massive song, and Da Do Run Run Run, I Do Run Run. Do you remember that one? No, Hass is looking at me like I'm mental. You see, to me, I go, oh yeah, I remember that one. It's a real kind of classic rock and roll. I mean, the title of the song is Da Do Ron Ron, so I mean, pretty weird. Maybe I'll play that another time. But these singers were absolutely incredible, and they were always produced by Phil Spector. Now, this is what went down with them and another band. Really weird. It was around sort of the late 60s. Phil Spector, and it was soon after this song, he made them do a song called And Then He Hit Me. I mean, what were you thinking? They recorded it, and of course it just went down like a lead balloon. Nobody wanted it, and it didn't do very well, and it's really weird. And they did things like Leader of the Pack, and these are great songs. But apparently the Crystals' voices, so there was 3 of them, they couldn't record things very quickly, and they could only record in a certain place. They wouldn't come to LA. So Phil Spector started using a different group called the Blossoms, and then releasing it as the Crystals. Now, this obviously hacked off both the Blossoms, who were like, excuse me? They're doing all the vocals on it. But also the Crystals were going, we didn't do that song. Why are you releasing it as a... So there was all this kind of internal fighting. The tension mounted. And then, of course, there was a breakup in the end because apparently Phil Spector then got tired of both groups and then started concentrating on the Ronettes. Now the Ronettes were massive, and he just concentrated on them, and that really hacked off the Crystals, and they broke up, and several of them went off into different bands, and so did the Blossoms, and they went on to be big in other areas. But it just shows you, like, things don't really change. The arguments don't change. Record companies don't change. You know, if you dig into anything, you'll find the stories are all the same. But you'd never know it because it wasn't talked about at the time. There wasn't social media. There wasn't the same press. So nobody knew that. So that's the backstory. But this is the official Crystals singing it loud and proud, one of their biggest hits. And it's just a love tune, and it's from 1963. Enjoy, enjoy. It's the Crystals on the Music Grades.
If you liked this episode of Yalla Home, drop a like and subscribe.
95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.